Greetings collectors and welcome to today's horror-packed show. I'm taking an honest look back at the games of yesteryear. In today's show, expect horror, domestic violence and blood. This is Phantasmagoria. Today we have to travel all the way back to 1995 to take a look at the PC classic that is Phantasmagoria. Back in the mid-90s, home PCs were going through a transformation. Floppy disks, although widely used, were on their way out and the rise of CD games had begun. Not only could the CD format hold more information, they enabled the rise of full-motion video in video games. This made for some interesting advances in game style. Along with games such as The Seventh Guest, Phantasmagoria was among the first to pioneer telling a horror story through video rather than traditional animation. With more advanced graphics, Phantasmagoria set out to deliver shocks and scares with its 18-rated point-and-click adventure. Although relatively unknown today by the newer generations, this game caused a huge stir upon release. It was one of only a few games to depict full-motion gore and a very controversial rape scene. I wanted to cover this game on the channel because I feel that it's been a little bit misrepresented online at times. Yes, there is the controversy, but underneath all of this is actually a very solid point-and-click adventure game. The game was originally released in the big box black format as seen here. It is possible though to find the budget release and also small regional variants. The artwork is nice and it takes a minute to work out what you're actually looking at. In terms of price, a black box original UK edition will cost you anywhere from £10 to £20 depending on condition. In the US, expect to pay around the $15 mark for the black box. Prices are a little unstable on this game. I have a hunch though that this game will at least hold its price over time. As you can see, my edition is a little dog-eared as a consequence of buying from eBay. Overall, it's a nice collectible, suitably dark and mysterious. Sierra fans will also notice the name Roberta Williams, the legendary game designer. Roberta is known more for the King's Quest series here in the UK, but has a good track record of producing many 90s classics. You will notice the various 18 ratings on the cover and even a call out that the game can be password protected to lock out controversial scenes. If you've played Phantasmagoria, you'll appreciate that there is a portion of adult content included. However, the option to remove the non-family friendly elements is a bit of a contradiction when buying an 18 rated game in my opinion. It's always nice to read the specs needed to run the game. This original runs under Windows 3.1 or DOS 5. You're also going to need 5 MB of hard drive space, as well as a 640 by 580 SVGA display. I'm fairly sure that I can cope with the spec today. If you were born after 1995, the chances are you've never used Windows 3.1 or DOS, which is fine. It does lead to problems though when trying to run this edition on a modern PC though, but I will cover that in a moment. Inside the box you should have a warranty card and a Sierra 1995-96 games catalogue. It's fun to look back at these, very nostalgic. No printed manual to be found here, but you will find this as a readme file on the discs. And how about those discs? Within the box you should find 2 CD cases. A standard double size and a fat case. Open these up and you'll be astonished that the game is split over 7 CDs. Be thankful that you didn't buy the Japanese Sega Saturn version, known as Phantasm, which came on 8 discs in total. This disc set will be truly unusual for modern gamers. With capacity of storage media now commonly measured in gigabytes rather than megabytes, this is a great experience for those new to retro gaming, and a really nice piece of nostalgia for those of us that had to go through this long install process back in the day. So, back to that age-old problem in playing older PC games in the modern world. My current setup for mid to retro games is a fairly high-spec desktop running Windows 7. As it stands, out of the box, the game will not run, even under compatibility modes. Thankfully, Sierra have provided a wizard install tool via their website. This will allow you to install the game with no problems and you can run the game on the DOSBox program. Once you complete the wizard install, loading all 7 discs, you can play Phantasmagoria without the need for any CD swapping during the game. There are re-releases of this game that will play via a simple download. I'm a bit of a purist at heart though, so I'm running this from the original CD installation. So, to the game itself. You'll be straight into the menu screen in which you have a number of options. I suggest checking out the intro movie if you have not already seen it. It sets the tone nicely for the rest of the game. It introduces the gamer to high-end visuals, imposing music, and of course that first glimpse of gore and horror. Starting your game couldn't be easier via the Start Game option. I then suggest starting at Chapter 1 as logic would dictate. You're invited to watch yet another cutscene and begin your adventure in the Carnavash estate, a mysterious abandoned old mansion that you've just purchased. The gameplay is very much as you might expect from a point-and-click adventure. You have a talking skull that you can call upon for help when needed. To be honest though, his suggestions aren't particularly insightful. There's also 8 inventory slots for all the good stuff that you need to pick up to solve the puzzles along your adventure. The opening of the game is very straightforward. You take control of Adrianne. Open drawers, find matches, explore cellars, talk to people, etc. In this sense, it's classic point-and-click logic and storytelling all the way. Early on I found myself anticipating the horror. Surprisingly, Chapter 1 ends and I found that there was very little in the way of horror or controversy. We begin to learn about the mansion's previous owner, the mysterious Carno, and the game alludes to black magic and torture. Early on in the game, an evil is released into the house and possesses Adrianne's husband Don. This sets up the story for the rest of the game. The experience is a very standard point-and-click adventure, albeit with interesting graphics and locations.
Don?
Chapter 2 begins to move the story along. Now in the early stages of possession, Adrianne's lover Don begins his descent into an ever darker spiral of behaviour.
What are you doing?
Well, I'm starting my new book.
So what? Did you go buy the drain cleaner like I asked you to?
What? Drain cleaner?
Don't be coy with me. I asked you several times to go buy me drain cleaner. Now, did you do it?
Well, I know you said the sink was clogged in your darkroom, but you never asked me to go get you any drain cleaner. I would have remembered something like that.
You know, this is just like you. I bust my ass for you all the time. And you don't do anything but sit on your butt like you're doing right now.
What? What is wrong with you? I don't understand.
Fine. The next time you want something, don't come crawling to me.
Chapter 2 also broadens the narrative by letting Adrianne explore outside of the mansion. Whilst visiting town, she visits a number of shops and their kooky inhabitants. It's worth interacting with the shopkeepers as they will provide you key information and access to useful items later in the game. As the game progresses, the overall tone does get rather dark. By Chapter 3, Don is well on his way to the dark side. It's around this point of the game that you'll know whether you're a fan or not. Despite the slightly dodgy 3D rendered video, B-movie acting talent and convoluted puzzles, there's just something about the storyline that held my interest. It's the sign of a decent game when, despite its shortcomings, the overall experience makes you want to progress and adventure on. Despite enjoying the game, there are some really painful moments. Anything where you have to engage Cyrus, but particularly his mother Harriet, can really test your patience. I just found the character of Harriet really just too much at times. I'm assuming that her character was for contrast, as the comedy relief against the dark background story. At times she seems a bit out of place though.
Listen, you old windbag, how about I just leave?
No, I'll shut up, whatever you want.
Harriet does contribute something to the storyline though, as it's revealed that she has a talent for palm reading. As you might guess, she sees something very dark ahead for Adrianne. At times in the game, there is a lot of speech and you'll be wanting to fast forward to get to the meatier parts of the game. I won't post too many spoilers in this review or how to complete the puzzles, but I can tell you that the game gets much darker the further you progress. By the start of Chapter 4, there is a very bizarre rape scene of Adrianne and gruesome murders happening. However, these events still seem to take a back seat to the puzzle solving itself, which is a very good thing in my opinion. Throughout the game, you'll visit numerous locations within the mansion and the local town, The story is well crafted, although somewhat predictable at times. Chapter 3 ends with revelations from a former associate of Carno, known as Malcolm. He gives pivotal information and clues about the cursed book and what might really be going on with Don. The story builds towards Chapter 7, culminating in an epic chase scene between Don and Adrianne. By this point things have got about as dark and as crazy as they'll go, with various depictions of murder and torture.
It would kill him. It almost did. For 2 weeks, Carno lay in a coma. But then, one night, he awoke, swearing revenge.
Now, I can't complete a retrospective on Phantasmagoria without mentioning that scene. Chapter 4 starts with what has become known as one of the most controversial in gaming history. It allegedly depicts Don raping Adrianne. I will show an excerpt from the scene here, and let you come to your own decisions. It's worth highlighting that both Don and Adrianne are clothed. However, the scene is deeply disturbing whichever way you look at it. It's certainly one of the most analysed scenes in the game. After Chapter 4, the murder flashbacks come thick and fast. This is what horror gamers really came to see. There's a whole variety of gruesome magic tricks gone wrong, right through to being killed in a greenhouse by soil. It's all wonderfully over the top and a real treat if you have a sense of humour about these things. Things really escalate quite quickly towards the end of the game. Lovers of gore will be pleased to know that they are well catered for here. I won't reveal the details of the final chapters, but needless to say though, the game does climax pleasingly as Adrianne attempts to end the curse. There's some great energy and it was satisfying to know that the game did build to a decent conclusion, even if parts of the final scenes weren't quite what I was expecting. In terms of controversy, yes it is in there, but the impact is somewhat less than I expected. Going into this review, I had been led to believe that Phantasmagoria was going to be on the top end of extreme in terms of content. However, at times the murder scenes seem rather comical, the alleged rape scene is just strange, and most of the gory scenes are no match for big budget modern horror movies. I have to say though that there are a couple of standout death scenes that I did enjoy watching. Perhaps the most offensive thing that happens in the game though is naming the cat Spaz. I'm not sure if this means something a little different in American English. It could be considered a little offensive to those that use it in British English terms though. Graphically, the game is very pleasing. The video animation is clearly dated, but I actually like the charm it gives the game. It just wouldn't be the same if all the locations were traditionally animated. In terms of sound, this was a little bit more hit and miss. Some of the cutscenes have a very B-movie quality to the sound, and the acting for that matter. The sound was just enough to get by though. In the end, I actually came to enjoy the reuse of the horror MIDI theme. This preceded all of the murders and you knew what was coming based on the music. Although the acting in the game is clearly terrible from some of the actors, I find that it's all part of the experience. Adrianne's husband Don appears to be reading from a script most of the time, and he's very fixated on drain cleaner. The worst acting offender though is definitely Harriet. Just every line of dialogue is given as if she was reading in a school play.
Of the spirit world.
Hello, Harriet.
Please, have a seat. Let the seance begin!
Adrianne herself though is very tolerable as a protagonist. Within the confines of this type of media, it's a job very well done. She's a likeable everywoman, and you will be rooting for her by the later stages of the story. I did question a few times why she would put up with Don's behaviour, but it all serves to reinforce her good nature. It also shines a light on the nature of domestic violence. Whether intended or not, this is probably one of the deepest takeaways from the game.
No, here's to you, Victoria.
Other townsfolk also give quite believable performances. I particularly enjoyed Harv from the general store.
Sir, do you have anything that would clear a badly clogged drain? You know, a drain cleaner?
Drain cleaner, huh? Well, let's see, let me think. Here we are. This will do the job.
Great.
You gotta be careful with that, though. That's sulfuric acid. I mean, it'll burn through practically anything.
I know, don't worry.
All right, then that'll be $4.75, please.
Phantasmagoria has clearly aged very badly in the graphical and sound departments. However, the story and actual gameplay still stand up to create a very playable game. The puzzles are not so ambiguous that you have no ideas what to try, and yet there is enough here to provide a challenge, especially if you want to see all of the Easter eggs and the best ending. What I found most interesting about playing through this game was how my impression changed from only having seen online reviews. I've seen a few reviews where the game is made out to be a non-stop gore fest and endless controversial scenes. In truth, there are a few scenes of this nature, but these are generally outdone by the proportion of good quality adventuring. I think at times we're underselling how good the underlying game actually is here. So, the final verdict. For anyone who has a love of classic point-and-click games, I think that you would actually get something out of this one, as would collectors of Sierra games. For casual gamers with only a passing interest, I think that this game might underwhelm you. It doesn't deliver the sustained horror to appeal to the most serious horror fans, but does provide a good experience if you enjoy horror movies with a low-budget feel to them. When it comes to Phantasmagoria, I came for the gore, but stayed for the storyline and the puzzles. This is the true accomplishment of Phantasmagoria. Despite suffering as an early adopter of the new technology, its great writing and charm see it through to become a much-loved gaming horror classic.
God, Spaz. You scared me. Not a nice kitty. Don't do that.
Hello again, I hope you enjoyed today's show and thank you for the view. Remember, you can always comment, like, subscribe and find us on the social media sites below. Happy collecting!